G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for a massive trade and draft update. After some big movement bringing in our expected trade targets so far, some pick swaps, and updates on a whole bunch of other deals that are still to come. The news is pretty much all good, and by the end of this update, hopefully, I'll be able to paint a much clearer picture of what our squad is going to look like going into the preseason. To give a bit of structure, we'll start off by discussing the completed trades to date, the latest clarity on all the expected trades to come over the next week, and then our current draft hand, as well as what directions West Coast is planning to take with this before day one of the draft, before finally who else we've been tied to that could still come in. But before we get going, I'm going to try to make a point of putting the word out to all the new viewers on this channel and my videos to please consider hitting the subscribe button if you haven't already. I've noticed a shift in the audience since the end of the AFL season, and now that the trade and draft content is coming out. But for all those who are new, I do cover weekly AFL and waffle reviews during the season, as well as the trade and draft coverage that I'm doing right now, and then off-season content tracking players setting up for the upcoming year, as well as everything in between. So if you like to consume West Coast updates in this format, the content is here all year round. Anyway, let's get back to these trade updates. So, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there has been a ton of trade movement on the West Coast front in the last couple of days. We've had Brandon Starcevic confirmed as an Eagle, Oscar Allen confirmed as a Lion, and more importantly, the compensation has been confirmed at pick 2 for Oscar Allen. We've still got Devon Robertson coming in with a plan that kills 2, if not 3 birds with one stone, which I'll explain. And Tyler Young's value has also started to take shape. So I think the best way to unpack this is to start with that mega trade, and then I'll explain how that deal also looks tied to some unofficial agreements that involved Oscar Allen, but also Dev Robinson. The deal that brought Brandon Starcevic across also involved a really big exchange of picks that I think favours us heavily. At our end, we swapped pick 17 up to pick 13. So I'm using the numbers that they've now had pushed back to after our pick 2 compensation. So I suppose some people would say 16 to 12, but just know that. So every number I say is now after our compensation. So we swapped pick 17 up to pick 13. We then downgraded picks 23 and 24 for picks 33 and 52. And then Cal Toomey summarised it best by explaining that from an overall points exchange, we essentially handed over pick 23 for Brandon Starcevic and Dev Robinson, which I'll get to. We've also managed to retain that. Dev Robinson part he did not say, by the way. It's just me speculating, but it does make a lot of sense, and it's pretty much no other explanation for it. We've also managed to retain the same number of picks overall, which matters a lot. I also mentioned that Oscar Allen and Dev Robinson were tied to this deal as well, so I'll explain that now. Allen's the most obvious one. West Coast worked closely with Brisbane to ensure that the free agency offer they put forward to Allen would trigger band 1 compensation and give us this pick 2, which is now confirmed. That's actually in both clubs' best interest, by the way, because if Brisbane were to undersell this and they triggered band 2, then it just raises the risk that West Coast us just turn around and just match the bid and say, look, we want to keep him now. He's not actually worth losing for band 2 compensation or end of first round, especially since that's around 30 now this particular season. But also, just given all the other traffic between the two clubs, it pays to make sure we're both satisfied with the deal, which includes us getting pick 2 from the AFL without costing the Lions any more than the salary cap space they're making for Allen. The Devon Robertson update is actually a lot more interesting. So today, the trade radio update on Robertson was that he's actually unlikely to come across during the trade period, and he's shaping to be delisted by Brisbane so that we can pick him up as a rookie after the national draft. Now, you might ask that if Brisbane were prepared to let him walk, why wouldn't they just package him up as part of the deal for Starcevic? And the detail here is actually in our recent assistance package from the AFL. See, apart from the end of first round pick, the AFL also agreed to give West Coast an additional 4 spots on our rookie list for 3 years, tentatively, meaning they can revise it and change their mind over the next couple of years. Anyway, I initially assumed that these would all be our NGA players. Turns out that if Dev Robinson is brought in via delisting, he can actually join one of those rookie list spots, which means that we've managed to capitalise on our assistance package, which I think is pretty meager compared to the other ones that have been handed out in recent years, and get maximum value out of it. It also means, and you can tell this to anybody who still didn't like the Starcevic trade, that we actually got both Starcevic and Robertson with that pick 23 value that Toomey mentioned. I did say in my last video that Robertson would come across for the price of a couple of hot cappuccinos. So if it plays out like this, then I'm going to go ahead and say I got that right. Also, as a kicker, the other cool thing about moving up the draft order in the first round while keeping the same number of picks overall at this stage is that we've also made sure that we can pick up 3 players at the top end of the draft before we have to match a bid on our NGA bolter, Tyler Williams. But I'll talk about that more in the draft section of this video, and I'll explain that one away. The only remaining trade update now is Tyler Young at Richmond. That's guys coming in, who should come across any day now, possibly on the back of a Campbell Chesser or Liam Ryan trade, just with the picks that we may get for them. But just given the later picks that we now hold as a result of this Starcevic trade, I don't think that's going to be necessary to unlock him. The current update on Young is that we won't use pick 34 to get him. So it's likely going to be something like pick 38 or 53, which we currently hold, that gets him over the line. Like I mentioned in my last video, there's a really good explanation why his trade value and his real worth don't match. So go ahead and watch that one if you need a little bit more background. But the quick summary is that just like Dev Robinson, we're getting an absolute steal with the pickup. Otherwise, to our outgoing players, Campbell, Chesser and Liam Ryan, there's been very little news. Chesser is likely to go first because apparently, according to West Coast, we're just closer and aligned with Carlton on what we think he's worth. And apparently we're a little bit further apart on Liam Ryan, and it's also been said by us that we're happy to keep him if St Kilda don't pony up and come to the table with what we want. Which brings me to our draft hand. As it stands right at this moment, which will change, we currently hold picks 1, 2, 13, 34, 38, 53, and 58. Like I mentioned, there's potentially 2 picks coming in for Chesser and Ryan, and then 1 pick going out for Tyler Young. But there's also a really good chance that we move on a couple of pick-for-pick trade options too, probably before draft night. So I'm going to explain that now, and this is not me just playing, fantasy AFL. This is rumours. Pretty strong ones from the sound of it too. The first option that's still on the table is that we are apparently going after Gold Coast's pick 7. That's after Alan pushed it back with his pick 2. And we're planning to use a combination of picks 13, 34, and then one other, just to exceed that draft value. So I think it's beginning to look like we're the most likely to get a hold of this one from them, just because they've got academy players they want to match bids on. But that's not the only update. The other one is apparently Essendon is very serious about landing pick 1 from us to take Willem Dersma, and they're likely to try and move that pick with their picks 5 and 6 to get it done. So purely speaking on these hypotheticals, I think there's a very real chance that we could come out of this trade period with picks 2, 5, 6, and 7, as well as some later picks to match bids on our NGA talent, including Tyler Williams, who just bolted onto everybody's radar at the draft combine. What we do with these picks is a little difficult to speculate on still, but essentially the main player we'd be guaranteed to be losing is Willem Dersma. I'm not sure what everyone's opinion of that is. We may feel that 3 top 10 picks is enough already if we get the Gold Coast first rounder by trading up, or we may just want as many top 10 picks as possible. I'm not sure, and personally, I'm not sold on even trading pick 1 for those 2 top 10 picks for Essendon, just because I do know that outside the top 2 players, so Cooper Duff-Tytler and Willem Dersma, the other names that we're all kind of keen on, or the ones at the top of the order, they're going to disappear quicker than you'd think with all the academy-tied players that will push into that top 10 without actually costing top 10 picks. So when guys mention Sullivan Roby and Dyson Sharp, there's every chance that by pick 4, which probably will slide out to pick 7 at least, those guys are gone. So you could find that the best talent disappears very quickly in the first couple of picks once those match bid comes in. Anyway, on to Tyler Williams, since I've mentioned him a couple of times now. He's one of the 3 NGA players that we're tied to in this draft. And over the weekend, he posted some massive results. Good for us in one sense because it gives us something to be excited about. Bad for us in that the value of his is going to skyrocket because he finished in the top five for both the 20-meter sprint and the agility test. So I jumped online and had a watch of his online highlights after that. And it looks like he's shaping to be another Darcy Jones, who I rate incredibly highly and was really disappointed at the time when we missed out on him. I think we were like one or two picks away, and then GWS snapped him up, and I was really hoping we'd get the Elijah Hewitt, Ruben Ginby, and Darcy Jones trifecta with the picks we had. Anyway, that's in the past. Tyler Williams is looking very similar, and he's going to be a quality guy, and it's a very good chance we're going to get him. Which nearly covers everything we know so far, except for a couple of names that we've been tied to over the last couple of days. So these names include Harry Schoenberg. It's a name I'm pretty sure most would be familiar with. He's 24 years old. He's just been delisted from Adelaide's midfield. And one of my mates, who's a bit of an AFL fantasy guru, rates him really highly, and he's really stoked with that rumour. So I've kind of let that excitement transfer into me, and I think that's a good rumour too. Just as a minimum, as a delisted player, one of the good things is it doesn't come with that expectation that we're promising AFL games to get him across, because there's a lot of guys we've brought across and can't promise them all a game. So if we do pull him in, along with the depth that we've already added, I think our waffle side next year is going to be able to blow the waffle competition away. Number two, David Swallow was suddenly tied to us this week as a backflip on his retirement. Personally, I hope he doesn't come across, mainly for his sake. I love that game of footy that he finished with the goal that was actually better off being the behind that it ended up being. And I just feel like we've already stacked our list with the exact sort of thing that he brings to the table. And his career finished so perfectly, like I just said, that it feels like he only stands to tarnish that without anyone really gaining anything out of him coming across. And anyway, the three last rumours is that we're still tied to delisted Tom Berry, but that he's also apparently receiving inquiries from GWS as well. So otherwise, I hope I've managed to cover what I promised would be a massive trade and draft update for us. We've still got a week left until the trade deadline. So hopefully this time next week, I'll be reporting back to confirm most of what I've said today. Also, hopefully I'll see you again then. And as always, cheers until then.